please silence their phones as well so we don't have any interruptions. All right, perfect. So we're going to get started. Like I said, my name is Baylor Myers, and I am the new field coordinator with Americans for Prosperity Ohio in this region. I graduated from Miami University this past May, and I started in this position on July 8th. So I'm very excited to be here, and very excited. This is my first big event, part of my job, and happy to see this great turnout. Basically, how we're going to format this event is that Senator Beagle will speak for about 25 minutes, and then we're going to open up the floor to question and answer / discussion session. So without further ado, it's my pleasure to introduce Senator Bill Beagle.
Everybody hear me okay? Yes. Well, for better or for worse, you can hear me. That's a good start. But thank you all very much for taking time out of your busy day to come here and learn a little bit more about Ohio and Ohio's spending, to be more exact. So it's good to see some friendly faces here. So let's hope we need these big time. And thanks to Americans for Prosperity for arranging this. It means a lot to me that you guys, like I said, to come out here and that they take time to help organize this. My name is Bill Beagle. I'm the State Senator for the 5th District. I was elected to the State Senate about 2.5 years ago, and my district includes all of Miami County, where I'm from. I'm from the big city. I just picked up Preble County at the beginning of the year. I have most of downtown Dayton, Harrison Township, Trotwood. I have Jefferson Township, western Montgomery County, and southern Dark County, rolling up almost to the Greenville. So 350,000 people. And prior to that, I was on the Tip City Council. So made a big leap from a community of 10,000 and a few co-workers and getting cornered in the library and the grocery to 350,000 people, 33 co-workers in the Senate, and getting cornered in 4 different counties. So it's good. We're here tonight, I think, to talk about positioning Ohio through policy choices about our spending and about economic development and job creation. So I'm going to spend my time tonight talking about how Ohio spends its money and what we're doing to help job creation. So those are the couple of things we're going to talk about. And as Baylor said, we'll try and keep this to about 25 minutes or so. Bear with me here. Otherwise, I could just have the family wait at me as well. And then we'll take questions after that. So let's talk spending first. For those of you who aren't aware, we do a 2-year budget in Ohio. It's called the biennium budget. We just finished it by the Constitution. It has to be signed by June 30th of odd number of years, or even odd number of years. And so the governor just signed our budget. And we're going to talk at a high level about that. We spent, over the course of the next 2 years, we're going to spend $62 billion of your tax dollars. $62 billion, just under that, is the amount of the budget in the biennium. So we're spending about $31 billion a year over the next 2 years. And to complicate things a little bit, let's talk about the fiscal year. So our fiscal year starts July 1st and ends in June 30th. So when I talk about this year and next year, I'm talking about the year that just started July 1st and will end next June. And then when I talk about next year, that's going to be 2014 to 2015. So $62 billion, those are general fund dollars, those are our Ohio tax dollars, but that also includes federal Medicaid money. For those of you who are probably aware, the Medicaid program is paid for by federal dollars, and of course, where does the federal government get its money? From you and me, and as well as state dollars. So it's a combination of those. It does not include capital budget stuff for roads and bridges and various other federal grants. So just so we try and understand the language we're using here. So we spend $62 billion over the next 2 years. The question is, well, what do we spend that money on? All right, Bill, what do we spend the money on? And I've got a friend of mine who's worked for the Senate for over 20 years, and he's our budget guy, named Roger. And I'm going to paraphrase what he says. He says that Ohio does three things with this money, generally. We medicate, we educate, and we incarcerate. We medicate, we educate, we incarcerate. So let's talk about those three topics in a little more detail. So when we look, let's first talk about the biggest part of the budget, human services. And human services is going to include Medicaid, but it goes beyond that. It's going to include, drug addiction services, mental health services, and other types of human services spending, and that's going to account for 53% of those dollars. 53% of our dollars goes towards human services. The big chunk of that's going to be Medicaid. Our kindergarten through 12th grade is what we call K through 12 education, accounts for an additional 28%. So 53% is going to be human services, 28% educating our kids from kindergarten through high school graduation. And then when you consider higher education, that's going to be our 2-year school and our 4-year school, that's going to be an additional 8%. For those of you who are adding up, that's about 89% of our dollars. 89% is going towards human services and education, K through 12 higher education. When you add incarceration, which is the Department of Rehabilitation and Corrections, we call it corrections, or DRC, they're another 5 to 6%. So you're in like the 93, 94% of the dollars goes towards human services, education in all forms, and then incarcerating our prisoners. So we have an additional 6% that we call other government, and we will talk a little bit about that down the road. So Medicaid is going to be the biggest portion of our budget. We're going to spend about $16 billion next year, and closer to $17 billion the year after. So out of the $52 billion, about over half of that's going to be on Medicaid. The governor proposed Medicaid expansion in the budget this year. And that didn't last very long. The General Assembly took that out and didn't agree with that. And I sense we may get some questions about that. But just from a process perspective, there is a committee, bipartisan, what they call bipartisan, I think it's bipartisan, that is meeting. We do have a Medicaid committee in the Senate talking about alternatives to expansion. I'm not entirely sure what that means. There are ways, I know a big chunk of their work's going to deal with reforming Medicaid. And so we're going to be working, there's a committee working on that, and we'll wait and see if they come up with anything, and if so, we can react to that. Next year, we're going to increase our spending on Medicaid by $2 billion. And then the year after that, by an additional $1 billion. So billions of dollars this program is growing at. It's a huge concern. The silver lining, if there is one, is that we go from increasing $2 billion to $1 billion. So that rate of increase is shrinking a little bit. That's not much of a silver lining, but it's something. And that's something that we've been working on through cost containment and a number of strategies that we've used at the state level to address those folks who consume most of the Medicaid budget. We're working hard on reducing the cost of the most expensive clients. And so we're trying to see some rein in the growth of the Medicaid budget. Turning to our education, we have a new funding formula this year, which for those who get more money makes them happy, and for those who get less money makes them very angry. And that's what happens anytime you've got something that's formula-based and you make a change to the formula, you're going to make some friends, you're going to make some enemies. So we have a new funding formula. We are going to increase aid to our schools by just over $1 billion over the next 2 years. So it's going to increase by about 4.5% next year and over 6% the following year. So that's the largest increase that the legislature's given in over 10 years. The largest increase we've given in over 10 years, over $1 billion of additional K-12 education funding. And so to put it in perspective, we talked about $16 billion in Medicaid. We're spending about $6.6 billion on education. So, less than half of that is what we spend on Medicaid, we're spending on education. We're spending about $7 billion the following year on education. So we're spending more to Medicaid than we are to educate. The In terms of where the money goes, well, the formula, what it does is it tries to take into account a district's ability to raise money through property taxes and so on. And so the money will go to poorer districts, whether you're urban, whether you are rural. You will get more money if you don't have land values or an ability to generate yourself, and wealthier districts will just plain get less. We are providing $100 million in something called the State Aid Fund. And the State Aid Fund is a pool of money that schools can compete for if they can demonstrate innovation and creativity in educating our kids. And 2 years ago, we created something called the Local Government Innovation Fund to encourage the same type of thing, sharing of services and getting creative. And so what you're seeing with the General Assembly is we are transitioning away from maybe just handing money out and creating pools of money that you can compete for, that you have to show, creativity, problem solving. You have to earn that money a little bit. And we're trying to do it in local government, and their funds got cut severely 2 years ago to help make our budget match balance those. And now we're trying it on education, $100 million for the State Aid Fund. We're also investing $30 million in early childhood education. Now, we argue a lot in the Capitol, as one might imagine. We probably get along more than you think, but we have our moments where we disagree on things. One of the things that there seems to be a lot of consensus on is that it makes a lot more sense to invest dollars in early childhood education. That's going to pay off for us in the long run than trying to help a kid who's in 10th, 11th, 12th grade who's way behind. So there's a surprising amount of consensus, maybe not in the front row, but there's a surprising amount of consensus that investing in early childhood education is the way to go, and we've invested an additional $30 million in that. In terms of higher education, we put in a 2% tuition cap increase, which is important now that I've got a child in college. That means something to me. And although it may not seem like it to those of you who have children in college, but for the past 5 years, Ohio has had the second lowest tuition increases in the nation over the last 5 years. We follow, we lost to like Delaware or Maryland, something like that. We've had the lowest tuition increases, so we're trying to make college as affordable as possible, and tuition caps are a way to do that. And as taxpayers, I know we've got many folks who are taxpayers in the room, you work, someone in your household works, and by taking advantage of the public schools, by taking advantage of Ohio's public colleges, is one way you can get your tax dollars back for you in the form of a subsidized education. We also have a new higher education funding formula. Okay, another funding formula. It's different than how we do K through 12 education, right? We're talking to 2-year colleges, we're talking to 4-year colleges. What's creative about what we've done to our colleges is that in the past, if you're a college, you get incented and you get paid by the number of people who are enrolled, okay? And in the future, what we're doing is we're going to make sure that you earn half of your money is going to come by course completion and degree completion. So, I'm a big believer that people are going to do what you're incented to do. Institutions are going to do what you are incented to do. So rather than incent these institutions to bring people in the door, and rather perversely keep them there as long as they can, we're going to try and incent them to get them through that course and get that certification or get that degree and get them out the door. That is, that may not sound very exciting, but at half of their funding, the closest state to us is going to be Texas, another innovative state, where 10% of their funding is based on that type of concept. So ours is at 50%. So we're way out there, and other states are looking at us, and we're going to see how we implement that. We're also in an effort to try and keep college costs low, is working on that post-secondary enrollment option. It's called College Credit Plus in the new budget. And we're trying to expand that and work with that so that more students who are capable and able and want to take advantage of getting college credits while they're in high school, so that you can enter college with a certain amount of credit, probably obtained at a cheaper rate than the college you're going to. Maybe you get out of college earlier and save some money that way, or maybe you do something different with that advantage. But we're trying to make that more accessible to help working class families. And finally, we'll talk about corrections and incarceration. And, okay, what are we doing to control this other, this third leg of our spending? And we're doing a couple things. We're looking at privatizing institutions. And some of those numbers didn't work out, and we didn't privatize as many institutions as we thought we would. We're also looking at outsourcing certain services. Our food services, for example, at our prisons is looking at being outsourced to save money. And then the local example we have here was down at Dayton Correctional, where the facility used to be a single bunk male facility. And I've been through that when it was a male facility, one prisoner per cell. They've transitioned it maybe a year or so ago to a female facility that's now double bunk. So the exact same footprint now carries probably not quite twice as many prisoners, and we save money that way. And then the final thing we did was sentencing reform, a bill that had been years in the works. It was passed within the last 2 years, and it looks at the cost. It costs us about $25,000 a year to keep a prisoner in one of our big prisons. We do have other facilities, community-based correctional facilities, CBCF, for those of you who are keeping score. A community-based correctional facility can keep a prisoner for about $11,000 a year, maybe a little less than half of that. So we're looking at sentencing structures so that maybe those folks who aren't really a threat to the community are treated or handled by the community-based correctional facility, and we save our prisons for the real hardcore cases, and we can save some money that way. Those are some of the things we're doing to try and keep costs under control on the correctional side. So, again, we're talking Medicaid, education, incarceration. Some of those aren't really, mandates per se, but these are things that we kind of have to sort of spend our money on. So all we can do is work hard to try and control those costs. Ultimately we have to educate our kids. We have to take care of sick people. We have to keep our streets safe. So we're doing what we can to keep those costs under control. So that leaves the small portion of the budget, the other government, I think it's called, or something of that effect. So what are we doing in that area? Well, the state budget, the general fund dollars that we talked about earlier, excluding some of the federal dollars, and I don't want to lose too many of you here. We're going to increase spending by about 6.7% next year, and about 4% after that. When we pull out education, and when we pull out the Medicaid portion of it, and then we pull out some tax cuts that we're doing, and we'll talk about that in a minute, and some debt service, then there's some dollars that we have perhaps more control over. And the question is what are we doing with those? Well, spending will go up by 4.7% next year, and then the following year it ought to go down. So we are trying to keep a rein in on those dollars that we can most control. Now, I mentioned tax cuts. That's a huge portion of the budget. We have a tax plan, and we'll talk a little bit about that. We have, this year in the budget, we have $2.7 billion in tax cuts in reform. So we talk about spending money, but we also have tax cuts that we're giving back to you. We are increasing the sales tax rate by 1/4%, and that's a strategic decision to transition away from income taxes and taxing success and productivity to consumption taxes. So we increase the sales tax rate by 1/4%. We reduce income taxes by 10% over the next 3 years. 10% tax cut on personal tax rate for the next 3 years. And then there's a 50% tax reduction for small businesses on the first $250,000 of income. 50% tax reduction for small businesses on the first $250,000 of income. Now, to take care of our lowest wage earners, we have grandfathered the homestead exemption, but we've instituted, or reinstituted, I should say, there has been a means testing on the homestead tax exemption. We're reinstituting that, and we're instituting a means test on the $20 personal exemption, so that those who are the lowest wage earners can still take advantage of that. And we're also introducing an earned income tax credit, and probably the people in this room are familiar with the refundable earned income tax credit you get at the federal level. In Ohio, this will be a non-refundable now, so that for our lowest wage earners and our lowest taxpayers, they can take advantage of a break, but folks will not be walking away from the table with money from the government if they haven't paid their taxes because it's not refundable. And one of the things that we also, and this is the most popular idea, is we tackled one of these tax expenditures, which we are constantly being asked to look at: tax loopholes, tax credits, things like that. Those are tax expenditures. And what we did is we've eliminated the property tax rollback on new levies and replacement levies. Well, what does that mean? Well, those of you are probably aware that you have this rollback feature on your property taxes of 12.5%. And what that means is that the state, the jurisdiction is going to get all the money. Most of it comes from you, the other 12.5% comes from the state. And where do we get our money? From you. We get it from you. We get it from your income taxes, we get it from your sales taxes. So we're taking it over here and we're giving it to your school system, we're giving it to your library, we're giving it to the mental health board. And in the future, we think there's a tax transparency and an honesty and taxation issue here to make sure that you as voters understand what exactly the levy is costing you, and just to make the transaction a little less murky. Because next year, we've thrown around a bunch of numbers out, right? We talked about $6.6 billion in primary education or K-12 education. Next year, in property tax rollbacks, the state is going to pay $1.8 billion in property tax. And in the next year, that goes up to $1.83 billion in property tax rollbacks. So, to us, it made more sense to honor the promise we made to jurisdictions. So for those who have levies and are going to keep those levies, you're going to keep your rollback. But if you want a new levy or a replacement levy, then your citizens are going to need to understand what exactly they're paying for it and make that decision. They do what they don't. And then we'll kind of clean up our books on our side over time. That $1.8 billion will go away and it just functions a little different. So let's talk a little bit about what we're doing about job creation and businesses. We talk about the tax cut for small businesses. That's one of the things we've done to help businesses. We've eliminated the estate tax or the death tax. We did that in the last General Assembly. We've just recently was announced that there was $1 billion in rebates from the Bureau of Workers' Compensation. Their funds were excessive, so businesses and nonprofits and other jurisdictions are getting rebates of $1 billion from the Bureau of Workers' Compensation. We've encouraged energy exploration in the eastern part of the state. There are people who would shut down the natural gas exploration in the eastern part of the state if they had the opportunity. And we have encouraged that. We believe in regulating it and making it as safe as we can, but we're encouraging it. And one of the things that impacted me is as I walked through manufacturers right here in our area, the number of manufacturers who are making things for the rigs over the east. So this does have an impact on us locally. If any of you know a manufacturer or somebody works for a manufacturer, it's quite possible they may be making stuff. So I'm walking through these shops and you go, well, what's that big thing over there? Well, that's going over to Chesapeake over on the east to do gas exploration. We've created the Common Sense Initiative, a chance for folks to call attention to rules that are impeding their ability to get things done, and there's a rule review. Lieutenant Governor Mary Taylor is in charge of the Common Sense Initiative. We created Jobs Ohio, which is a public-private partnership to try and encourage job development. And I know that that's getting some bad press, but the feedback I'm getting from economic development professionals is complimenting Jobs Ohio on its timeliness, how quickly they can respond to local jurisdictions who say, hey, we have a company who wants to do something. What kind of incentives can we offer from the state? The state gets back to them very quickly now, as opposed to a lengthy period of time. And their creativity, that they're offering better packages that are more competitive by virtue of Jobs Ohio. And finally, something that's near and dear to me is we created the Office of Workforce Transformation. In the Senate, I chair the Senate's Workforce and Economic Development Committee. Okay, well, what's workforce development? Well, we want to make sure that, that our employers and our hiring managers, a bunch of them are out here, that when you go to find people, you've got the skilled employees you have when you need them. And as parents, we want to make sure that as our kids get out of school, whether it's a career tech center, whether it's a high school or a 2-year school or a college, that they have the skills that can get them employed. And that's what workforce development is. Because when I was knocking on doors in 2010, the conversation was all about jobs, right? You're knocking on the door and, oh, my daughter's moving back in with us, so-and-so lost a job. On rare occasion, there's somebody talking about how somebody has to work tons of overtime because they're not hiring any new people because everyone's unsure of what's going to happen. So we're just going to work our workforce, not really to death, but working over. So you're hearing these things. And then I went to a meeting of the Dayton Regional Manufacturing Association, and the conversation that night was, where are the workers? Where is our next generation of manufacturers? And where do we find these people? And that was a bit of an epiphany point. And come to find out, you may or may not surprise you, how hard it is to take an unemployed workforce and have them have the skills they need for the jobs that we're open today. That's tough. May not sound tough, but it's tough. And so, a couple things. One, the Senate created the Standing Committee on Workforce Development, which, as I said, I'm the chairman. We never had a workforce committee before. And then we've also created the Office of Workforce Transformation. Oh, well, what's that? Well, workforce dollars are kind of like Medicaid. A lot of them are federal dollars that come in to do various programs, and there's some state dollars to do things. And it's a hodgepodge, and it's spread out across like 13 different departments, 23 departments. And so there really is no single point of accountability for workforce development. We don't know what a workforce budget looks like, and so on and so forth. So the governor, he has a workforce board, as other governors have, but he created the Office of Workforce Transformation so that there's a single point of accountability for workforce. And so what we're doing is working with businesses to identify what jobs they have open, what skills you as employers and hiring managers need, not just today, but 3 years from now and 5 years from now, so that we can begin to work with our high schools and our career tech centers and our colleges so that they can begin to develop curriculum and teach these kids what the employers say they're going to need. That's what workforce development does, and that's something that I would say we're doing, to try and get a leg up on our competition, whether it's Georgia, whether it's Kentucky, whether it's Indiana, so that our workforce is the best we have to offer. So let us summarize a little bit, and then we'll turn it over to you guys. So, we spend $62 billion over the next couple of years. We're trying to be creative, trying to be innovative. We are focusing on where the money goes. That's when we had an $8 billion budget hole that we had to fill. You have to go to where the money is. It's in Medicaid. It's in education. Somewhat in local government. It's in corrections. So we're trying to be creative and innovative. One of the things, is we're trying to control spending. One of the things we did, we're also returning extra dollars to you in the form of tax cuts. The other thing we did with these extra dollars is something called a rainy day fund. Now, when we took office in 2011, our rainy day fund had less than $1. Less than $1. The previous administration had used it to fill it, right? So today, we have $1.5 billion in our rainy day fund. And I think it is great. Now, we can find people who, it's been a tough 2.5 years for some people. Local governments, libraries, you name it. There's people who pay that. But we have $1.5 billion in our rainy day fund. That is a statutory limit. We're not allowed to have any more. So we're trying to control spending. We're trying to face some of the roughest, toughest areas to look at, like Medicaid, and control that. We are repopulating the rainy day fund, getting money back, doing tax cuts, and trying to support small businesses, because that's where our job creation comes from. That's where many of our people work, is in small businesses. I'm trying to create an environment so that our employers know that we want to partner with them. It's in our best interest to help them succeed, and it's in our best interest to help them know that we're here to try and help them. We can't give them everything they want. We can't sell our souls to them necessarily, but to the extent that they succeed, it means more tax dollars for us, it means more jobs, and everyone benefits from that. So with that, I think I will pipe down and I guess open up the floor to questions.
Perfect. Yes, before we start, I just have one request, that everyone be respectful to one another. A lot of contentious issues out there, a lot of different opinions. So just keep respectful and a good civic dialogue. So if you would like to raise your hand, I'll just ask for your name and where you're from. So hands, I see one gentleman back there.
Benjamin Jones from Butler Township.
Hello, Ben.
Hi, how are you?
I'll be better in about 20 minutes.
The Ohio Supreme Court has ruled on 2 or 3 occasions that the current funding model for local public schools is unconstitutional. They've directed the Ohio legislature to come up with a more equitable funding model. Can you explain to us why the legislature refuses to take this issue up?
Sure. Let me answer that by the response is that this new funding formula we think will withstand scrutiny and solves the problem of the growth. Now, why did it take so long? I don't know. And will it withstand scrutiny? We think it will. The courts will probably ultimately decide if it is. I think, when you talk about, one of the things I've learned in the 2.5 years that I've been there is as complicated as city government was, state government's complex. And when you try to come up with a funding formula, it's a challenging task. It's a challenging task, and it took the administration a long time to come up with theirs, which we modified significantly. We think it will withhold scrutiny, withstand scrutiny. We created a formula that distributed more money across more districts. And this is kind of getting out into the wonky land here, but our formula compared to the governor's, the prior formulas, we're spending more money, we're touching more districts, and we're keeping fewer districts on something called the guarantee, and no district is getting less money. And so we think there's some successes in that. And certainly there's some holes in the formula. We're hearing from school districts in certain areas that can't take advantage of some of the increases in their property values, and they're flat. They have zero funding, additional funds coming in, and they're just kind of stuck. And some of them are working together. I don't know if that means we'll change the formula, but we'll go through the process and see what it works.
All right, if we could get some more hands up for questions. Your name.
I'm Christine Kettler. I'm from Clayton, near here. You were talking about Medicaid being such a large part of the Ohio budget. Would you explain how Medicaid operates? What does it cost the individual who qualifies for it? And how does Obamacare impact Medicaid? Do people who are on Medicaid, can they qualify for Obamacare or vice versa? Can you explain that?
I can explain some of it. I'm not able to sit there and tell you what the exact qualifications are. What I can tell you is that at the state level, we're limited on what we can do with the Medicaid program. We can say how much we're going to pay our doctors. And you'll see that in the newspapers, and perhaps your own doctor will talk to you about Medicaid reimbursement rates. That's something we have some control over. What we don't have control over is eligibility requirements. So we can't necessarily change the terms and say who gets in and who gets out. That way, they keep it consistent, I'm supposing, nationwide as to who qualifies for Medicaid. However, if you're a doctor in Indiana, you could get paid something different than a doctor in Illinois, and a doctor in Ohio is getting treated the same thing. In terms of, what else did you asked? Eligibility.
Well, I was asking about Obamacare and how, if people who are on Medicaid, can they then qualify for Obamacare or vice versa? How do the two impact each other?
My understanding is that when we talk about, Obamacare, people who qualify for Obamacare and subsidized insurance premiums through a state health exchange, that's different than your Medicaid population. Your Medicaid population are going to be low-wage earners, and what we're looking at expanding is taking folks who do not have children and have a certain income eligibility requirements. All children are on Medicaid, are qualified for Medicaid today, so we're not talking about children. We're talking about a group of adults who fall within certain areas who could be on Medicaid. The alternative is folks who don't qualify there might qualify for subsidized insurance premiums that they can buy through state exchange, which is more the Obamacare. And Ohio has decided not to do its own state exchange, and let the feds set it up. That was the governor's decision. I don't know what the implications are that for long term. We're setting up some regulations on folks called navigators who can help people through Obamacare, but they're not the Medicaid population, and these people who qualify for Obamacare and how that works they work in tandem together to cover a whole group of people, but it's not the same group of people, if that makes sense.
Just one further question on that. Do the people who are on Medicaid pay anything at all, or is it totally free?
I would have to look at that. There may be copay requirements, but I don't know. I don't know if I can speak to it.
All right, if we can get, I see a hand back there, so we're going to go over there.
It's Karen Zakowski from Dayton. I was just going to say the Medicaid eligibility limit is $1,500 or less in assets. That's when you qualify. And I had a question about that 12% property rollback. I was concerned about Montgomery County raising the property tax as a result of the cut, a 12% cut that you talked about.
Well, the jurisdictions are going to get the same amount of money. The question is are you going to pay it directly, or is the state going to pay a portion of it? So it doesn't, if they go to the ballot box, I'm just going to say,
A new levy.
what's that?
A new levy.
I mean, if they go for a new levy, the big difference is that they're going to have to ask for the extra 12% in rollback. So they're going to have to ask for perhaps more for the same amount of money. So their anxiety isn't about the dollars exactly. It's about you as voters. How are you going to respond when what was the 2 mil levy becomes something a little larger, so that we can get the same amount of money? So we aren't taking money out of their pockets. But when they go to sell the next levy, they're going to have a change in strategy in explaining that, because to get the same amount of money, they're going to ask for more levies. I may be talking to you. What's that?
Sorry, we have a question back here first, and then I'll come up there.
Mary Ellen Bucher, I'm from Piqua. I'm a high school teacher, and over the past 15 years, we have had to dummy down our curriculum. Not just me, but many of my fellow teachers, because we have had to have our students pass our classes, or our grade card does not look good. So how are we going to prevent colleges from having to do that same thing now that their grade card has to look better and more students have to pass more classes more quickly?
Sure, that's a great question, Ellen. And that's one side of the equation, is how do we make sure that there isn't cheating or lowering of standards? And the other is how do we make sure that there's equal access to kids? Because what we don't want them doing is start turning down a whole bunch of kids because they just don't think they're going to graduate. So I think it's going to take scrutiny and oversight, which may make people queasy about that. But if we don't try something, then we just keep doing the same old thing. So we're going to try this, and it is going to take oversight. You bring up a great point, and there's a number of things that I know we're aware could be subject to unintended consequences, let's say. So we're trying to be aware of, and hopefully that awareness will help us design the details or some sort of audit procedure.
right, I see some hands over there, but I know we have one right here, then I'll come over there.
Bill, I'd like to ask you a question
Sure.
about go back to the property tax in the school district. My interest is Ohio trying to level the playing field for all the school districts in terms of how the money is distributed to their school district? So every student has so every student has the same equal opportunity. I don't think we have that today in the school system.
That's a complicated question. You know, at first I thought, are you asking, is everybody getting the same dollars? No. Ideally, will they have the same opportunity? That would be fabulous. Can you do that through dollars? I don't know. There's a lot of things that go into opportunity, right? You know, what kind of parents do you have? How engaged are they? The quality of your faculty, the curriculum. Those things can all, yeah.
What I'm really leading into is, you know, where you have the more rural areas, that the money isn't coming in like it is, say, in the semi-cities like Cleveland, Columbus, or Cincinnati, Dayton. You see what I'm saying? They're not getting, they don't have the tax base, so they're not operating on the same level monetarily, but also, that also equates to opportunity for the student, does it not?
It does, and some of the challenges we've had to formulate do impact rural districts. Now, if you're a rural poor area, then you're going to get more money than a rural area that isn't so poor. And we all know, that agricultural land values have gone up because property taxes are capped. Schools, unless they get a new levy, can't take advantage of that, for better or for worse. So yes, some rural areas are impacted for the reasons you stated. They're also impacted because enrollment's flat, and we have instances of districts that have enrollment dropping, but they get the same amount of money, and that's, I don't know if that makes sense either. And so you try and hit all the areas. I suspect we may come back and look at the formula again, but you raise a good point, and yes, there are some districts out there who are struggling because they are rural and they aren't taking, they can't take advantage of that increased agricultural values, not producing the legislative income. The facilities are what they are, the student body is what it is, and costs keep going up, and money's kind of flat. Hopefully, with an extra $1 billion, maybe it'll help, maybe it won't. We'll see where we are 2 years from now as we do another budget, and maybe we can.
All right, I know we have some questions over here. I'm going to start with this lady right here.
I'm Kate Birch, and I'm from Oakwood. And you said in your last answer that we don't want to make it so kids can't get into school because they might fail. I just want to say I totally disagree with that. I think that one of the roots of the big problems we have in education right now, particularly in higher education, is that there is a myth that every child should go to college and that every student can succeed. You cannot deny the existence of the bell curve of ability. So why spend money on near certain failure?
I agree with you, and I can't tell you exactly what I said because I don't have a good short-term memory. But what I meant to say is you don't want colleges turning kids, being the ones to make the decision about who's going to succeed and who isn't. It's maybe the right way to go. You are absolutely right that college isn't for everyone. And I think, part of this workforce thing that I was talking about is making sure that, students, parents, guidance counselors are aware that there are alternatives out there. And let me tell you, there's plenty of people out there. There are ways you can make a very good living with a little bit of post-secondary stuff from a community college, from a tech center. You talk to the auto shop, they need people, manufacturers need people. And you're right, not everybody wants to go to college, not everyone. Plenty of people have the intellect, they're not testing people, they're not classroom people, so let them find their way elsewhere. I agree with you 100% that way. I would love to see the parents and the student make that decision for the colleges. And I don't know if they will, it's just, you're right on.
back to the other side here, to the gentleman in the collared shirt.
Thanks for being here. My name is Tom Carlisle. I live in Clayton. My question is that, our country is supposed to have certain things that the federal government does and certain rights and responsibilities that the states do. And over the last many years, especially over the last 5 years, the federal government's shoving more and more stuff down our throats. Two primary examples. Obviously, Obamacare is one, and more recently is Common Core. Here you are trying to improve education, and you've got people from who knows where now trying to tell us what we have to teach. Now, my question is, you see what they've done to Arizona. Arizona tried to protect themselves and they got smashed. Time after time after time. What is the governor of the state of Ohio going to do to protect us from Washington?
Take your time, Bill.
That's the essence of that's a great question. And it's overwhelming to think of a response, and so part of it is, as a state senator, one state senator, you sometimes think that you go in there and you're the big dog, right? Regardless of my name's Beagle, you're the big dog. and so you think you're like the chief executive or something, and then when you get to government, it's not in the private sector. I was in banking for years. I own my own business. My wife owns a business. My brother owns a business. I come from the private sector, and so you go into this, and you begin to realize that it just isn't the private sector. It functions very differently. And I'm trying to be gentle because I'm probably being reported. It functions differently. So that it is a how the place works, and whether it's the way it should be or not. It's a relationship business. And so I tell people that I don't feel like the CEO of anything. I feel like the sales guy. And the process itself is, there is a process to get things done. It's unusual, and it doesn't make sense to a lot of people. So when it comes to your question, how do we protect ourselves from Washington? When I look at Washington, I'm beginning to have an understanding of not really why things are the way they are, but how they have got there. We understand things. And how do we keep Washington from encroaching? One of the things, maybe divided government. I think some of the things happen when one party is in control of everything, and you can get more done. I'll argue for the last 2.5 years having a Republican governor and the Republican legislature, we've gotten more done to turn Ohio around, and I'm going to talk about that. But there's risks. And so maybe divided government's an answer.
What specifically, divided government comes from the voters.
Yes.
What specifically is the state of Ohio's executive branch, legislative branch, judicial branch, whatever? What is it they're doing, or what can they do to protect us? It's just like they're getting stealing.
Well, we can pass resolutions, we can pass bills. I don't know if they can withstand court scrutiny. The feds get to overrule laws on things, and when things are in conflict, then the federal government rules. So we can pass things and say leave us on. Well, I'm saying in a lot of legal cases, when there's conflicts, it seems that the federal government rules will prevail over state government. Yeah, a lot of people don't. There's certain procedural things we can do. In the end, it probably comes down to the courts and getting different people in Washington. Maybe that's the answer.
Senator,
Can I give you the answer that everybody wants to hear?
Why not?
Follow the Constitution.
We just need the people in Washington to do that.
You'll need the people in the state house to do it.
That's all of our responsibility.
The governor wants us to opt into the Medicaid
Right.
program. And so far, the state legislature, I understand, has opposed it. He's still trying. How does that go to work out?
Well, I guess there's a couple of paths. In theory, the legislature could come up with something that the governor may or may not sign. I think the more realistic option would be somebody gets a ballot initiative going. And whether that's for full expansion or something else, I don't know. But I would be, if I were a betting man, which I'm not, I would think you may see something more on the ballot in 2014 that we as voters will get to decide on. Now, we won't get to decide on what it looks like, but we'll get to vote yes or no. That would be just speculation.
All right, I think you guys forgot about me there for a second. We're going to take a question.
I know.
Ms. Denise, how are you?
I'm fine. To respond to that ballot initiative, we had a ballot initiative. I don't know how many people in this room worked as hard as our group did to collect signatures, but we have resoundingly said we don't want that here in the state, and the governor's not listening. It bothers me that the Medicaid expansion discussion is going on when, in order for that process to even happen, you have to trust the federal government. In order to say, okay, we're going to expand Medicaid, we're going to take your money in, we're going to put more people on the rolls, you have to trust the federal government, A, if they're telling the truth, which, and B, that they have the money.
And then once
again, and they don't have the money. So the expansion is just, it's a straw man. We can expand, we can put more people on the rolls, but who's going to pay for it when they pull the rug out from under us? And so we have told the government, we have told the people of this state, have told everyone in your world, and we're kind of part of that world.
Yes, you are.
Well, we've told the government that we don't want it. And so I think the governor needs to hear it again, I guess.
Understood. And the governor does do that. A couple of responses to these. This Medicaid group is working, although expansion is perhaps part of the conversation. They're also looking at reform and alternatives to expansion. So I think the conversation is bigger than what the governor proposed. What that all means in the end to us as taxpayers, that's anybody's guess to see what this work produces. But and I agree with you. Issue 3 passed overwhelmingly in an interesting political year, and there was no mistaking that message. There was no mistaking that message. Unfortunately, the way the Ohio Constitution works is people come back and put on a countermeasure. The right decision, for better or for worse.
All right, we have a question back here from the gentleman right here in the back.
Hello, my name is Patrick Richardson. I'm from Toledo. I was wondering what your opinion is on allowing citizens that have concealed weapons permits to carry those weapons on college campuses.
I've been supportive of all the gun legislation that's come across, and I think that that's something that I would be supportive of. I tend to be somebody who likes to hear from both sides. It's not something that we've addressed directly. As I said, I've got a daughter on a college campus, and I don't have any issues with that. I found legal gun owners to be some of the most responsible people. So, they're not the people, they're not the good
All right, our next question is back here.
Hi, my name is Lisa Crosby.
Hi, Lisa.
Hi, you know me from Cameron, Ohio. So I will NFIB, so I will preface it by saying I'm not your enemy.
Okay, good.
I put your signs out in Trotwood, which takes a whole lot of courage.
I sense a big buzz.
Yeah. A question coming. with all due respect, what I'm hearing tonight is a lot of, we're going to invest $1 million, $1.8 billion, and hope it works. In this economy, we cannot throw that kind of money at problems without a high degree of certainty that it's going to be effective. And I hear an awful lot tonight from you that fingers crossed with no guarantees. And as a taxpayer, that bothers me deeply.
Well, I guess my response is that there are, there's no guarantees, but there's metrics. And I know there's teachers in the crowd tonight who will tell you that we are meddling to the nth degree on how they are evaluated and what they're teaching. I'm not talking about Common Core stuff. So that we can measure what happens and we know whether our kids are getting the education they need. And if those schools that are failing continue to fail, we'll try different things. And for those schools that are succeeding, we'll try to give them rewards. We'll try to replicate their success other ways. We've expanded school vouchers and school choice across Ohio. We expanded it again in this budget to try and make sure that all of our educational dollars are being competed for, because we think that that's going to produce the best educational result. And I know that educational professionals will take issue with a lot of the ways we measure them and all these things. But I understand that it sounds like, well, here's your check, and we'll see you again in 2 years. And I don't think it's quite like that. Although I don't want to mislead you and say that everybody agrees with how we're evaluating these things and how we're evaluating our success. You can't get people to agree on anything.
All right, I'm going to go to the woman in red here, and then the woman in black, and then back here, and I think that's all we're going to have time for, unfortunately.
Hi, Christy Jones from Vandalia, Ohio. There's currently a bill in the legislature to repeal Common Core in Ohio. Can we count on you to support that bill?
I don't know if it's in the House, and I don't know what's in the bill. Here's what I've heard about Common Core. And I sit on the Education Committee, and we make this commitment to Common Core, I guess, a few years ago, is I hear that Common Core is higher standards for our kids. Now, I had a chance to meet some folks earlier today, and we've seen a few people in the State House talking about their issues with Common Core. And, I would love to see what's exactly in the bill, because I don't know what it means to repeal Common Core exactly.
To opt out, to opt our state out of the Common Core program. One out. There's 5 states who are already out.
Right.
We want to be number 6.
Well, I can't make that commitment now. I would love to hear more from folks who don't like Common Core, and I heard from some. Hey, Ted. I'd love to hear more about people's issues with Common Core. We've heard some things, but again, we hear from a lot of educational professionals about, Ohio is doing very good at meeting a mediocre standard, and that's what we're doing. And so if we raise the standard, our kids will do better. And I can only tell you what I've heard. The governors put this together years ago, and
I'll send you some information. How's that?
I've got my card,
Okay.
so we can do that. And I'm not saying yes or no.
All right, guys, don't forget about me again. I'm back here. Like I said, it is 8 o'clock, so we have our one last question here because they shared the same question. So we're going to end right here, and then I'm sure Senator Beagle will be around with his card. Very interested in hearing from you all afterwards, but it is 8 o'clock, and I've made promises that we would finish around 8 o'clock. So here's our last question.
Senator Beagle, my name is Barbara Burkhardt. I'm from Warren County. And first, I'd like to respectfully correct something you said.
Okay.
You said that the governor decided to not go with the exchanges. I believe it's correct that the governor was forced to not accept the exchanges under threat of being sued because he would be violating the state constitution.
Okay.
But I would like to say that I know you are in the Senate, but in the House right now is HB 91, and we have a Republican speaker who will not bring it to the floor for a vote. Many of us have been calling for him to do so. It's the kill the bill, kill the Obamacare bill. We don't want it in Ohio. And if it does pass in the House eventually, would you vote for the, whatever it's called, in the Senate?
Absolutely. That I can commit to.
Sounds like a great note to end on. I want to thank everyone for coming tonight. This has been an excellent event, my first big event with Americans for Prosperity Ohio. It really means a lot to me, everyone showing up. I want to thank Senator Beagle.
Thank you all. You know, it's always great when you go out somewhere and inevitably I learned something. And I learned a bunch. I've met some new people, exactly. I didn't wear my asbestos suits, but that's okay. But I appreciate the respectful nature of questions. I respect you for challenging me. I think that's great. That's exactly what we need to do. And I appreciate that. And again, thank you very much for taking the time to come out tonight. I look forward to continuing the conversation.